Let's see if I can make this a little smaller. Anyway, so for the first part, I have the estimated revenues and the estimated other financing sources.
Yep.
And then we've got the appropriations, the other financial uses transfers out, and then the budgetary balance, which was $4,000.
Yep.
Part B, encumbrances and encumbrances outstanding. Part C, taxes receivable for the current year, the estimated uncollectible, and then the tax revenue, which is, of course, taxes receivable minus the estimated uncollectible.
Yep.
Cash is, and then taxes receivable, so the amount collected for Part D. And then for E, we've got the cash that comes in for the revenue for the fees, the building permits, and the parking tickets. And I separated those out just for, clarity's sake. F, we've got encumbrances outstanding, debited, and then credited is encumbrances.
Yep.
And then expenditures are debited and vouchers payable are credited for paying that out. For Part H, we have cash from bonds. So they debited the cash and credited bonds. Correct. Bonds issued for cash. Right. Okay. So yeah. Oh wait. No. Wait. Should that be? No, that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be switched out. Right. Debit. H. I debited cash and credited bonds. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Just got a little confused there for a second on myself. All right. And then the estimated other financial sources transferred out.
Okay, that one we really didn't talk about too much. Take
Right.
the estimated off of it.
Oh, so it's just other financial sources transfers out?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. And then cash is credited. And then for Part J, we have the vouchers payable are debited and the cash is credited.
Correct.
So then coming over here, we have the differences between the budget and the actual results. So let's see. Okay, so the estimated revenues was 200,000, and then the actual revenues was, what did I do? Okay, so then that was so that
reversed them, I think.
What?
I think you reversed them. I think the actual revenues and the difference are.
Oh, so that should be plus.
So the actual revenues were.
So the difference is, wait, that doesn't make sense, right? The difference was 196,000.
No. The actual revenues is not -4.
Oh, okay.
That'll be the 204.
The actual revenues would be the 204. Oh, okay, which would be the estimated revenues plus the budgetary fund balance.
No. Let's take a look here. Let's go down. We're just going to get all the revenues. So there's 150 for the taxes.
Right. Oh, so the property taxes that are collected, the 148.
Yep. And,
okay.
Revenues from fees, 32.
Oh, and then the cash and the parking tickets.
16.
Okay.
104. Yep, that's it.
And those are the three, or the four.
Yeah, 4.
Okay. All right. So then that would be so then the difference would be 2,000 because the,
Well, I did it right. I got 204. Yeah, before. Oh, it's gonna be 150.
oh, from the tax revenue. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Plus,
And 20.
oh, here we go. Oh, plus. Okay. And 25. Okay.
It never occurred to me. It's an unhappy coincidence that I have that 1,000 sitting there along with the revenues.
Right, right.
Change.
All right.
It's not gonna help you, but other people. Okay. So yeah, so
Okay.
4,000 is the difference. So they actually got 4,000 more of revenues than they thought they were.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so each. Okay. So then so I can fix that. I don't know why that's coming up. I'll figure that out. And then okay, so then for estimated expenditures was the 188,000 from appropriations.
Yep.
And then the actual expenditures was let's see, M4 and M37. So the encumbered purchase orders completed and let's see. 37. So 37 was the expenditures. So expenditures plus the 109,600 that was actually spent.
Yep.
Okay.
So 175,600 you said? Yep.
Yeah. Estimated other source of bonds was 22,000, and the actual bonds issued was 22,000.
Yep.
So no difference. The estimated transfers out was 30,000, and the actual transfers out was 32,000.
Yep.
With a difference of negative 2,000. Property taxes receivable at the end of the year was 12,000 because that was 160 minus the 148 that was actually collected.
Yeah, and I'm going to put in one more thing there. You may want to put in the estimated uncollectible.
Oh, okay.
Of 10. Just I should have.
So would the estimated uncollectible be? So I would put in the because I did, so for property taxes I did the 12 or the 160 minus the 148. So is it 160 minus the 148 minus also the part we assume will be uncollectible? So the actual property taxes receivable is 2,000.
I'll leave it exactly the way it is, but then underneath it, you may want to put that it was a that the estimated uncollectible is 10,000.
Oh, okay.
No, the net property. I should say net property taxes receivable. I'm not sure why I did that way. So the estimated uncollectible is 10,000. So in other words, you think we think we're only going to get another 2,000 back. So that would be the net
Right.
Taxes receivable.
Mm-hmm. All right. That makes sense. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
The encumbrances outstanding at the end of the year, I believe, was 0 because we paid the voucher payable. Did we? No.
What do we have encumbered in the first? Yeah, you're right.
Right,
Yeah.
because we paid the 109,600, and then also paid the 66,000 that was part of.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, the encumbered outstanding at the end of the year, we encumbered 120,000,
Mm-hmm.
and we only completed 110,000. So there should be 10,000 more outstanding.
Okay, so that's okay. So then it would be Okay, so then it would actually be the encumbrances outstanding was the 120, and then we take out the 110, or we take out the 109.
110.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so 120 minus the encumbrances outstanding, which is okay, that makes sense. Okay, so it's actually 10,000 for that. So that would be, let's see. Okay. Okay, so that would actually be 10,000.
Yep.
So net taxes receivable of 2,000, encumbrances outstanding 10,000, and then vouchers payable was 5,600 because what was that? That was so that was the vouchers payable plus the other vouchers payable, the 109,600 plus the 66,000 minus cash. Why did I put that? I don't remember why I put that. Okay. What vouchers payable at the end of the year would be? Oh, because that's right. Okay, so I paid 170 in vouchers payable. So then the vouchers payable at the end of the year that still remain is 5,600.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and so this is kind of the information that they would kind of look at to see what to kind of see how well they met their estimates and why they weren't, they didn't meet them and all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, today I think we're going to do, I don't think I sent this to you.
Oh, that's fine. I got my printer right here.
No, I get, hold on, let me, government-wide, let me check, give me 1 second. Did I say you government-wide financial statements last week? I don't think I did.
Yeah, we went over the Chicago, and then we didn't, I don't think we looked at the Illinois, but we looked at the Chicago one.
But did I send you a spreadsheet one or no?
No, I didn't get a spreadsheet.
Okay, let me, give me a second here. And send you. Weird. All my accounts for some reason are saying we need to verify it's you.
So goofy.
I know. I'm sure there's like some time lapse thing that all this amount of time went by. So it was like, oh, let's click on this, and then how do you know it's you? We'll send a text to your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is the last thing we'll cover. Yay! I just left this in Excel format. So,
Oh, okay. There we go. Just got it. Okay.
And so this is government-wide financial statement. So there's actually two of them. There's net assets that you'll see is very similar to the balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of like our, don't ever say that on a CPA exam, but it's our balance sheet.
Right.
On the balance sheet because they don't want to confuse people. And then this one on this following page, statement of activities, this is sort of like our income statement, but it's a very wacky income statement. So we got the two things. So we're going to do the balance sheet first, and this is the easiest one of the two. And basically, we have government activities and we have business type activities. We do them both separately, then we add them up and do them together.
Mm-hmm.
Nice thing about this is that they're all pretty much cut and paste. So we'll have our assets. Let's see. Not 100% sure I have. We can always add on. So we have government activities, and then we have business type activities, and assets. Okay, so we can actually just cut and paste these down here.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can just put, you can just also disconnect them using. So these would be the total assets.
Mm-hmm.
So these total assets, you just add them all up. And then over here for the total, you'll add both of them up. So they separate out the business type from the regular government type, and the idea that business types are usually profitable, and so it's a different kind of a thing than the governmental activities. Governmental activities is money going out, basically. But business type activities are money coming in. Things like O'Hare Airport, if they own a zoo or whatever. Those are all business type activities that will often make money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming in. All right, and we do the same thing with the liabilities. Okay, so unit total assets. Liability. And normally on a balance sheet, you say, okay, this is where we have our equity section,
Right.
but we don't have equity, and so let's have fund balance. The fund balance is sort of like what's left over. This would be the owner's share if we were to put it in the same terms. Okay, and this is a little bit wacky, and I'll talk about it in a second. Hopefully. And fund balance here. Oops. Okay, so this is just like on a balance sheet, it's got a balance. You'd have assets, liabilities, and equity. Assets equal liability, and basically it explains where you got them from.
Mhm.
For instance, how did you get these total assets? Well, you borrowed 1,760, and the whatever governmental agency this is kicked in 3428, and that's how you got all these assets. Basically explains where you got the assets. And you can either borrow the money, or in a regular business to be the owners kick in, but in this case the government agency, whatever it is, would kick in. And that's how you get the total assets. So it really just explains how you got these assets.
Mhm.
You know, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. You notice the internal balances, those net out to zero, zero. It's too light to see, but that's even worse. So maybe just leave something alone. So anyway, so that's what that zero comes out to. Now here's the weird thing about this, and this has to do with this, because this is something that's not on the regular governmental financial statements. They put on capital assets. These are like property, plant, and equipment. So this is our property, plant, and equipment. This has got capital assets, land, or streets, or buildings, equipment, police cars, all that stuff. Those are all in this capital assets. Now, in regular fund accounting, we don't have long-term assets. They're just all expenditures. So we only have cash, may have some receivables
Mhm.
that turn into cash. They may or may not put inventories on the list. Some governments do, some don't. But anyway, they don't have any long-term things on the list. So we put these long-term things on the list. Now, they also don't put on long-term liabilities.
Mhm.
So these are the long-term liabilities. Now, down here, we have the capital assets net of the related debt. In other words, these are the capital assets. This is how much we owe on it. Normally, this would be retained earnings, but we don't have retained earnings. There's no earnings. There's no owners. So this is sort of the difference between those two. And this can be positive, negative. I kind of made these so that they came out exactly the same, so that you could kind of see that 4,400 equals 1,200 equals 3,200. It doesn't always work out that way,
Right.
because some of the liabilities might not be for capital assets. Some of the liabilities might be for something else, for operating. We had to keep the school district open, so we issued some long-term debt. That would not be a capital expenditure. You get to pay the teachers, but you wouldn't be getting a building or anything. So sometimes these long-term liabilities, but in this case, I kind of fudged it a little bit, just so the 4,400 equals the 1,200 equals the 32, and same thing here, just so you can kind of see that this is generally the way it goes. So when you add those long-term assets and long-term liabilities on the books, and this is kind of a plug number down here.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean anything. You can't spend it. It doesn't like you get
Right.
3,200. I guess theoretically you could mortgage whatever it is that is for, but generally speaking, though, there's not those. This is not a usable amount. And then we have our fund balance is restricted and unrestricted, and we kind of went through the whole spiel on that. And they're talking about getting rid of those. The one that we
Really?
did, yeah, the 6 categories, or whatever, because they're so committed and all that other stuff. Because it seemed to be a little more confusing than helpful. It's a tough thing to do. You want to give people as much information as possible, but you also don't want to give them so much information that they can't make heads or tails out of it. So it's a tough line to, yeah. So anyway, so this is the total for both of them, and again, this is not that different than your regular old balance sheet. Assets, liabilities, exactly the same.
Mhm.
Fund balance, a little bit strange. We have this kind of a plug number to make up for the difference between these two. But then this fund balance, restricted and unrestricted, those are just amounts that can, what they can spend. The restricted ones can only be, in this case, only used for debt service. So they're saying, okay, we're setting aside 100 for paying off debts. We can still use 128. All right. Any question on that?
No, that makes sense.
Okay. And so, and too, one of the things too about the government, a lot of times you will see that the business activities, because they are for profit, a lot of times will have money that can be spent by government agency too. So it isn't like these business activities that you can't spend that money. You can. But it's going to be sitting in their account, until you do. So this is total over here. Again, this is very familiar to
Right.
a balance sheet. It's just you're just splitting it up between governmental and business. Okay, now Becky's financial statement that we have, and let me pull up. I showed you a little bit of it before. I wasn't really happy with what I showed you, so I made another one. I can't find. I think it's a statement of activities chart. Look at that.
Oh, I got that. Yeah.
It's in PDF and in So, and so this is, I thought I made it simpler. Looking at this is still kind of a mess. But this is basically what we do. And that is we have the government agencies, whatever those are, the government departments and groups and all that kind of stuff. And we split it up between governmental and business type activities. And so and you'll see that it's kind of a theme for these government-wide ones. They have two different groups, regular governmental ones, and then also business type. And the idea is that the criteria are going to be different for what you evaluate them on. And now, this is one of the really goofy things about it is, oops, I should actually go to the Excel version. Yeah, one of the really goofy things about this financial statement, it starts out with the expenses and it's one number. It isn't advertising expense and depreciation expense. It's one number. Here's the expenses. You want the detail? Go find the details in the CABR. But
Right.
here's the expenses, one number. And then it goes into how do we cover it? And so you start looking at the ways they cover it by the specific group, whatever it is, the specific activity. So for instance, let's take public safety. They may have revenues from, say, things like tickets, parking tickets and all that kind of stuff. So for public safety, they may have revenues from tickets. They could get operating grants from the state. Operating grants can only be used for operations. In other words, basically paying employees and paying for bills. And capital grants are used for basically probably plant equipment stuff. I should probably put that in there somewhere. So operating grants are just for paying the bills. Insert this. So operating grants, this is pay bills. So pay your employees, pay your whatever. And this is for buy assets. If you buy a police car, the state will pay $20,000 of it.
Right.
Okay. So you buy a police car, that'll be a capital grant. You cannot use that to pay your gas bill or anything like that for the police station, but you can use it to buy new equipment. So these are the two basic kinds of grants that you'll generally see. And we split those up so that you'll know whether these can be used for buying equipment or to actually pay the bills. And we do the same thing down here for the water department, concessions, airports, whatever. And so all these revenues and grants will be money coming in. For business type, it's mostly revenues. And usually it's a monopoly, so that it's almost set up that they can't lose money. The water department.
Right.
It'll be set up that, here's how much we have to cover. You got to pay this much for water, and it's enough that it covers at least covers our expenses. That's usually the way they kind of work with those. Okay, so once we do all of the, once we get the expenses for the specific departments and we get all the revenues to cover it, again, expenses first, revenues second, and these are kind of like revenues too, money coming in. So once we get the expenses as money coming in, then we do what we call the net revenues. And usually those are negative for governmental activities. You usually don't make profit on your police department. You don't make profit on sanitation or on capital projects, for instance. Putting in roads usually doesn't generate revenue. So a lot of times these governmental activities will be negative. That's expected. If you think about the definition of government as those things, what should be covered is those things that the private practice won't cover for themselves, Nobody wants to clean up the roads.
Right, right.
But it has to get done, and it's not going to be a profit maker, but so anyway, these are activities, and then you do the same thing for the business type. You do it down here. So the business type will take the minuses and the pluses, and usually the revenues will cover the activities for the business type. Usually they're monopolies, and they're the only one selling water. They're the only airport. They're whatever it is. Those are usually profitable. So if you add them all up, usually come up with net revenues of negative for governmental activities and positive for business type and plus or positive for the total.
Mm-hmm.
General revenues, property taxes, sometimes sales taxes are also in there. Some places charge for sales taxes and that sort of thing. But property tax and sales taxes and the general revenues, I know I told you this before. The general revenues are great because you can use them anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
These are generally restricted to whatever the department is. If you collect fees from the students, say for whatever it is, for computer access or whatever it is,
Right.
collect fees, those are revenues, but generally those revenues can only be used for the education. So these are usually very specific as far as what they can be used for. You cannot, if they say you can buy a police car, they'll give you $20,000, you can't take that money and use it for education. Which can be frustrating because maybe you need it for education, but it's, those are specific. These down here, these can be used for anything. So these are really the nice ones that so the general revenues are they're really important. And you talk to people who are actually in government, these are the ones they really like because they can be used for anything.
So it's the business revenues that can be used for anything.
Yep. Generally speaking, the business ones can be used for anything. And let's make this thing light blue. Like that. Almost invisible. So these can be used for anything. Yes, these the business type revenues, a lot of times they'll transfer, they'll say transferring this out of the airport fund because we need to fund whatever. And they'll do a transfer out. There's a lot of times there'll be a transfer from these activities to, say, the general fund. They need something. Sometimes they keep the money though if they're going to do expansion or something like that. But it's there's no one right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so coming down here, so with these property taxes and sales taxes, a lot of times it may or may not be profitable or changing the fund balance at the end. So these general revenues generally are there to pull up the governmental. These are the fund. They're not the fund that the business type. They're the fund governmental ones. Okay. And so the change in fund balance. So this is what will change the fund balance. So for the government agencies that have changed the fund balance, whatever this is, a lot of times they'll list exactly what the changes in each of the fund balances is. So they have a, what is the non-spendable fund balance? What is the committed fund balance and all that? They'll break them all out. But basically it's the total change in the fund balance. And it could be plus or minus. And the total can be plus or minus. Usually the business type are plus, not always, but usually. And what did I do here? Oh, I moved them. I moved my things up there. That's why. Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of just the general format of the thing, and it's wacky, and it's wacky for a number of reasons. First, starts out with expenses. Second of all, it goes across the screen. We're used to revenues minus expense, it goes down, and
Right.
this goes across, and then it goes down, and it only goes down for the general revenues. Why they make it this way, I'm not sure. You would think that they could just make it like the like this one.
Right.
To start out with expenses, do the revenues, and then go through the grants and all that kind of stuff, but they don't do it that way. It goes across the page. And when we were looking at that CAFRS report, you notice that they would get cut off. This would be on one page. This would be on another page. They kind of piecemeal it together on a number of pages, but we have. So I imagine it's because these would take up so much room going across. Anyway, so weird things about it. Starts out with expenses, and it's just one number. They don't tell you what it is,
Right.
and it goes across the page to kind of find out the net revenues are like a net, sort of like net income a little bit for each of the things. And then down here, basically the general fund, the general governmental activities are going to get bailed out by some kind of taxes usually. The other things too, but that usually shores it up for it. All right. Well, let's go to the one we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have our government agencies will be these first three. Kind of highlight. Water type is business, or water is business type, I should say. And revenue this is tax revenue. This is going to be the last thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we start out with governmental activities. Make it a little bigger. So governmental activities, we're going to have these. And here is the wacky part. I'm gonna let you tell me, what do we start out with first?
So let's see. So in terms of the statement of activities, I'd say we start out with activities. So I don't know. I'm a little confused right now. So it's it's expenses. It's just all the expenses, right? As one category.
Yep. So these expenses here are going to be the first thing. So those will be here. Expenses. And again, it's odd. It's So expenses, then we're gonna have our revenue, our,
Right.
yeah, revenue. Okay, so these are the grants, hardest part about this is the color. All right, so this would just be okay, and we'll figure out what the net amount is here in a minute. But let's go to the business type. Business type activities.
So that's only the water then.
Yep. And you notice that the water department is making money as you would expect because people need water and they can basically charge whatever they want for it.
Right.
All right, so we have the two, so these are expenses, we have the revenues coming in. And over here, we're gonna have our net revenues. Say net revenues. Governmental.
Mm, okay.
Those are not fitting very well. Okay. So we're gonna do the governmental first. So is it auto sum those? You can also do that. So B 20. plus C20 plus D plan, whatever. Yeah, I think so. It's coming to this, and again, these are negative, and you expect those to be negative because they are governmental. So the net revenues. Again, this is like sort of like net income for each individual
Right.
department. This would be and again, you'd expect the revenue, the governmental extra E in there. See, I do that. I give more to the students. I give extra letters. Other teachers don't do that. So, and this is very common that you see that these would be negative.
Right.
You know, the business ones should be positive. They usually are. All right, now the last thing we're going to do here is the tax revenue, and that is basically to bail out the governmental. Usually, the business types are not bailed out by the tax revenue is what we're going to use for most of the stuff. And again, the great thing about tax revenue is that you can use it for anything. And so this tax revenue is going to kind of shore up usually the government revenue. Oh, I didn't do the totals. Sorry. We need, okay, so the totals would just be. Did something wrong here. Hold on. Try that again. Okay, and down here we'll have the change in fund balance. Sort of like our net income at the end of the whole thing for everything, including government, or the taxes. So change in fund balance, this will be
So in this particular case, this government is not in debt or is not in because they have a positive total net revenue.
yes, yeah, they're definitely covering what they need to. They might still be in debt. It depends on.
Oh, well, right.
But if you're taking from the previous what are we doing here? If you take it from the previous, like this one over here, yeah, they have positive numbers here. And this one, yeah, they're covering their costs. They have more money coming in than going out. Again, the government agents, the government activities, usually money going out, and we short up with tax dollars. Usually isn't applied to business types. It can be, but not usually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a wacky statement, you know. It's
Right.
And now the nice thing about it, you know, it is possible you could go to the CPA exam and they may give you a whole problem on it. But more often than not, they ask you individual. You know, they'll give you a list of expenses, revenues, grants, and all that kind of stuff, and they'll say, what was the net revenues for public safety? What was the net revenues for whatever it is? Or they may be general ones. There was one that on the review that we had that was, how do you, which scenario most closely represents what activities, statement of activities, the order of statement of activities, and it said expenses, specific revenues, and revenues, and that was the answer to it. They had all these other ones, revenues minus expenses, which you're really tempted to put down, but yeah, it starts out with the expenses first. But yeah, wacky statement. But,
right.
But it just shows what for each government agency and for each business type activity, how profitable they were or how much money they lost, and how they covered it. And the idea is that this gives a little bit more information than kind of what we had before, which is basically a whole big list of revenues and a whole big list of expenditures. And at the bottom is the change in fund balance. And it was felt that, in these individual departments should be held accountable, basically. So yeah, so that's a wacky one. And this is the only financial statement that I think is really wacky in governmental accounting. For fund accounting, you don't have anything like that. Fund accounting is basically looks very similar to the regular income statement. It has revenues instead of expenses, it has expenditures, but everything else is the same.
Mhm.
This would be exactly the same, except for the things in yellow.
Right.
So for fund accounting, for governmental accounting, it's gonna have everything here, except for the things in yellow. Those are gonna be things that are, would not be, they're nothing long-term. It's a checkbook for a year. So the basic balance sheet kind of idea will be the same for governmental accounting. So the only one that, this is the only one that's really wacky. And to me, like the wackiest part is that the expenses come first and they're just one number.
Right.
Yeah, there's no breakout of what those are for. If you go back and you have to go into the footnotes and whatever to figure out what those are.
And why do they do it that way? Why doesn't it list out the expenses? Is it just
I think it's gonna,
practice?
well, yeah, and part of it is just there's so many of them. And there's so many
Mhm.
different, there may be dozens of things in government agencies and all that kind of stuff.
That's true.
And two, when they make up their budget and whatever, they have, it comes down to one number. And it says, okay, to be a legal budget, you got to cover this number. So basically, legally, they're supposed to cover these. So it starts out with a book. Here's what they have to cover. Okay, this is how they did it or didn't do it. So yeah, this is to be an important number, but yeah, it is very strange. There's nothing else in it. It's just here's total expenses.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how we cover them. So anyway, that is a. Oh, I got this in a weird format. That's probably why I didn't see it when I saved. Yeah, okay, I gotta change the format. Update it. This is in 2000. It's an ancient format. Okay, any personal things? All right, I'm not. I don't think I'm gonna put one of these on the for your final. It'll be more like the other one that we did, which is
Okay.
more simple. Which is more. It's similar to. I think it's much more. It's much more likely that you're going to get something like that on the CPA exam. They've been going more and more, getting away from just the nuts and bolts of it to actually asking questions about it.
Oh, okay.
Like what would have been the difference? I know that on, oops, not that. I just closed out. For instance, the appropriations, it's on your estimated expenditures. You can't call it that. But one of the things they would ask is how are the expenditures different? The estimated different than the actual. Now you have to know that appropriations are the estimated expenditures and compare it to it. So those are kind of questions that they ask a lot. There's multiple choice questions on this kind of stuff. And they have backed off a little bit from the governmental accounting, from what I understand, than what they did before. They used to, it used to be very common to get a whole accounting cycle, but you don't really do that too much anymore. At least in the reviews, they pretty much state that you don't get that very often. So anyway, I'll send you out a. It'll be more like the one that you did yourself, though, the practice exam.
Mm-hmm.
And you want that in Excel, I assume, right?
Yeah, if you can send it in Excel.
Okay. All right, and then it has to be in by next. I think the 9th, is 9th or 10th, the end of the semester. Yeah, well, I don't know what they call
I can have it in by the 9th. That's not a problem.
Okay, I'll send it out to you. And so yeah, let me get it in by the 9th, and I think it actually goes to the 10th maybe, but that'll give you a day of playing around there. So anyway, I'll go ahead and send that out, and that'll be it for the class. You're doing fine, unless you do something completely insane on the last things. You should be fine.
Oh, okay. And
Right.
I'll just double check and make sure I submitted everything I needed to submit and everything.
Okay, yeah, and I'll take a look and make sure the gradings. And I did not look at I didn't look at the grading last week either. I'm not worried about you.
Yeah.
My 6 o'clock group, I'm worried about. I'm not worried about you. So okay.
Well, they're undergrads, right? They're undergrads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it's supposedly a class I can work through on their own, but it's a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's supposedly it's a canned class, which isn't as good. Okay, well, I should be sending that out to you in about 10, 15 minutes, and
Okay.
turn that in, and you should be done for the course.
Well, thank you so much. I will send that in. I'll check on all my grades and everything. And thank you so much for teaching this. I know they weren't going to have this class, and then they were going to have the class, and then I was the only one that signed up. And so I'm so glad they found someone to teach me.
No, it's good. Yeah, it's great having you. And,
Yeah.
really good. And we got a lot more done than I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
In a very short period of time, and yeah, so very good. All right.
I was just going to ask, is there anything else from the book that I should study just from like a CPA exam perspective, because we covered chapters 1, 2, 3, 8, and 11. Is there anything else in there that like I should, read through on my own at some point?
There's not too much. And some of the stuff that's in there, like they have a chapter on hedging and all that kind of stuff, that is covered in the BEC section.
Mhm.
I would probably say don't. And here's why. First of all, you're probably not going to need it for other stuff. But also, the reviews are pretty good at just telling you what you need. And for some of this stuff, to go through and to learn it when it's likely not going to be on there or very heavily on there,
Mhm.
I don't see. Yeah, I can almost guarantee you're going to get something on governmental accounting.
Right.
It may not be extensive, but you can get something on it. You're probably going to get something on foreign currency translation. It's usually not big. It's usually small, but
Foreign currency.
Consolidations are virtually always on there.
Right.
The only thing I didn't cover on consolidations that you'll see sometimes, and that is if you have a parent company or a subsidiary that sells something to each other.
Oh, okay.
That can be a little bit tricky because you can't get a profit from selling something to yourself.
Right.
So even though, let's say the parent company, let's say General Motors, they buy a company that makes tires, whatever. So they'll buy the tires from the subsidiary. Now, when they combine the financial statements, they got to reverse out that profit because on the consolidated financial statements, they sold tires to themselves.
Right.
So, you gotta be a little bit, so that they will have, I shouldn't say they will, they sometimes have stuff on that, on the sales between the businesses. And basically you just reverse out the profit.
Mm-hmm.
So you reverse out the value of the inventory, you reverse out the profit. Because those tires aren't really worth, if the tires cost $180 to make and they sold them to the parent company for $200, basically you have to put them back to 180.
Mm-hmm.
Take off the $20 profit. It's not terribly difficult usually, but it's there. And you may, I don't think they really covered it too much though. The if you own more than 50%, but you're not 100%, you just multiply all those things by whatever the percentage is. So if you only own 70% of it, you only back out 70% of the profit.
Mm-hmm.
So $20 was back out $14. So there's that. Yeah, and too though, and this is really first all these courses are a little bit kind of getting your feet wet. And when you take the CPA exam, they're gonna if you study the materials they give you, there are people that their whole lives are made to get people through the CPA exam. They know exactly or pretty much what's on it and all that.
You're talking about like the Wiley test, the Wiley practice
Wiley,
stuff or whatever.
Becker, all those.
Right.
Yeah, so those are all so they know better and they know the extent of it that it's going to be on.
Mhm.
And part of the problem that we have in teaching is that we do a whole chapter on whatever it is, and it may not even be covered on it, or very
Right.
rarely. Whereas we might take 2 weeks to do it. And so I wouldn't worry too much, especially taking the CPA exam.
Mhm.
And some of that stuff. And two, I think I told you this before. If I didn't, I should have. For instance, like the CPA exam, it's a very condensed study period.
Right.
Usually less than 2 months. Usually less than 8 weeks. So when when you have this condensed study period, it doesn't make sense. Someone's say, "Oh, I'm going to start studying for the CPA exam a year in advance." You're wasting your time.
Mhm.
Your brain is trained to forget things, and it's very and actually it's trained to forget things very quickly. Did I talk about this?
No, that's interesting though.
I could send you something on it. It's yeah. Let me see here. Yeah, I'll send this to you. Maybe we can talk about it now, actually. It's something called memory, but okay. Stop it. Okay.
Oh, I just got it.
Okay. Let's close mine. Get it?
Yeah. It's like six tips about improving memory retention.
Yeah. And it's basically your mind is everyone's brain is basically set up to forget things. It has to.
Mhm.
And you talk to somebody, the color of the wall behind them, unless you make a mental note of it or say something about it, you're probably going to forget it. So, and there's one of the things about if you talk about people when they're at crime scenes or something like that, you get 5 people who get 5 different things. It's because their brain has already forgotten what has happened. It's forgotten what color car it is because the car wasn't important. You see cars going on the street, you don't say, "Oh, there's a red car. Let me remember that. Oh, there's a green car." So you get all these different answers, and that's one of the reasons why your brain is programmed to forget. And so you have to kind of actively trick the brain into remembering things for a longer term. And when we mean longer term, we're talking about seconds. We're not, long-term memory, as far as when you do discussions about it, is 15 to 30 seconds is considered long-term.
Right.
Your brain will forget what the color of the car is going down the street in hundredths of a second. So I don't know how much I get into it, but the synaptic plasticity. This is you strengthen the web in your brain, or the stronger the web is, the more likely you're going to receive it. You're going to remember it, and once you stop doing that, it weakens and it disappears. What was your room number when you were in third grade? Well, when you're in third grade, it was really important. You remembered it. You were there every day. Now your brain said, okay, you don't need that. It got rid of it.
Right.
Okay. So strengthening, something must be done within a few seconds of learning something. It can't be, oh, I'll look at that, whatever. It doesn't work that way. So when you talk about reinforcing it, and again, it's anything that strengthens the synapse as the deeper understanding. It literally could be any brain function. It does not necessarily have to be thinking about, academic, jumping through hoops of fire to remember. Okay, so a few ways: taking notes by hand. And if you think about, on a computer, you hit the letter or whatever, S. It doesn't take that much to do it. A little bit of brain power to do it. But to write the S, you have to hold the pencil. You have all these motor skills in your hand. Those are all brain, controlled by your brain. And so when you write the S, it takes a lot more brain power. Now remember, anything that happens in the brain to reinforce it strengthens it. So writing it out by hand, there's a real reason why that's better. It's because it reinforces that web. And again, it doesn't have to be, you might write a lot of things, but this, for this, whatever topic you're studying, if you write it out, it takes more brain power, and you have to hold the pen and certain, on the paper, hold the, make the letters and all that kind of stuff. It takes a lot more brain power. So that's one of the ways that you can strengthen it. Directory handouts are better than filled in ones.
Interesting. Okay.
I tend to do both. I do ones that are reading, and then I switch to ones you fill it in. Just because the ones you fill it in, the ones that you learn it on. Reading notes out loud and discuss them with classmates. So one of the things, it's hard for people to speak. You have kids, it takes a couple of years for them to really be able to communicate to you, and so it's difficult to do. So it's one of those things that takes a lot of brain power. You don't think about it because you've done it, a long time, but it takes a lot more brain power to speak. And interacting with other people obviously is even more, causes even more of those, the strengthening of that kind of web in the brain. So speaking words, and even if you are just speaking them to yourself, people say, well, I don't want to do that one because it's crazy. I'm talking to myself while I'm doing this. It's not crazy. It adds to the web. We'll just talk about that. Repetition. Writing something 100 times, which we always laugh about. What a stupid way to learn. That's actually not a bad way to learn. So sometimes just doing repetition is it can be effective. And I remember I had a tough math class that I had, that I would force myself to do everything 6 times because I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't remember it. It was one of those things, I didn't even remember the theory behind it, but it was something in calculus. But anyway, but repetition is also good. It's rote repetition just sounds like it's people laugh at it, but
right,
actually not a bad way to do it. Memory triggers. a number of different things you can do from memory. Guided readings, we talked a little bit about that fill in the blank stuff, but flashcards. And this is one that is a little bit odd, and that is color coded writing.
Makes sense.
The reasons why I do take time on the Excel, on the handouts and all that to color code is because it makes a difference. I know it sounds strange, but humans are one of the few mammals that can actually see color. Most mammals can't. They have no reason to. If you're a coyote and you're looking for bunny rabbits in the field, seeing color isn't going to help you. You're not going to see them anyways. They're hiding. And if you're a bunny rabbit, seeing the color of the coyote doesn't make any difference. So you're just going to listen for the coyote and try to run away or keep away from the coyote. So most animals, most mammals anyways, don't need to see color. And it's a little bit debated as far as why humans do. But anyway, it takes a lot more brain power to see color. Now, you don't think that. You don't look at this and say, whoa, there's green there. That's harder to look at than black and white or a grayscale. It is. And it takes more brain power. So color coding. Did you ever have Dr. Knudsen?
I don't think so.
Okay. Dr. Knudsen, when I got one of his books that he was using, I was teaching a class that he had taught. And he said, I said, I got a textbook here. I'll give it to you. He gave it to me. The whole thing was just completely color coordinated. The whole book was just completely filled in with highlighter. And I said, I told him, I said, is there a code here or something? And he said, no. He said, I just, this is how I've always done it. It makes sense that you would, because it's, again, color is hardest. So highlighting, doing things in color is a good way to learn just because it takes more brain power. Mnemonic devices, these are things you probably already know, acronyms, songs, all that kind of stuff. And writing stuff down from memory is also a very good way to do it. What you do is you try to write it down as much as you can from memory, and then you go back and compare it. Try to write it down complete again and compare it. Go back and forth like that again. It turns it into a more of an exercise rather than simply reading it. And this is another odd one, is studying before you go to sleep. For whatever reason, studying before you go to sleep is a good way to memorize stuff. It's also not a bad way to memorize things. To study for something, take a nap. Study for something, take a nap. Study for something, take a nap. Doing it in shifts. It goes in. And again, I don't even know if I haven't seen very much as to why that is. The whole reason I got into this memory thing was because of the CPA exam.
Right.
Students taking the CPA exam, and you want to tell them how, how do we study? And so I was like, well, I don't know. So that's why I got into all this. And there's actually quite a bit on it. And this is kind of a condensed form of it, but it's basically anything that can get that web. It does not have to be specific to it. It could be writing. It could be seeing color. It could be reading it out loud. It could be singing it. Anything that uses your brain will create a stronger web, and you can remember it better.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is. It really is interesting how it was. And I mean, the weird things are the sleep one, but the color
thing sleep's weird.
And also the speaking. You think if you're just saying it to yourself, well, who cares? It's not going to do anything. It actually does. Because it's just using those the brain power for speaking, which is we do it so often we don't notice it, but it's difficult, and it causes that to increase that web of whatever it is around the information.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any question on that?
No. Thanks for covering that with me. That's good for CPA and just for life, I think. Like, especially the studying right before sleep. I usually think, oh, I'm going to be less, awake. I'll be tired. I'll be,
Yep. Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. And it's and when I do this for students in class, I just tell them, so this is for all your classes. Stuff is not just for accounting; it's for anything. So, Okay. Well, I will send you out the exam, and great having you in class, and I will see you soon, I hope.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.